So we're gonna, there you go. Welcome everyone to Island Living Today. This is a monthly series with the goal of helping you live with greater ease and joy on Vancouver Island. We do this on the first Wednesday of each month, and we invite different local experts to share their insider tips for homeowners and answer your burning questions about buying, selling, or moving homes. This is made possible by three hosts: myself, Connie Henschel, and I mostly work out of the Nanaimo area up to Qualicum and Parksville is included. And I've been in the industry for about 14 years now. And Denise, I will hand it over to you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Denise Hodgins, for those who don't already know me. I work primarily in the Nanoose Bay to Qualicum Beach up to Bowser area. And yeah, I love doing these sessions. I love learning all the stuff that we do. And I'll pass it over to Laura. Laura, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Laura Healy, and I'm a residential real estate agent, primarily in the Nanaimo area. And I've been in the industry for about 11 years, and I just really love networking and connecting. And so I'm super excited to be able to learn a few new things today from two very knowledgeable experts in their industry. So I'm going to move to the next step, and I'm going to introduce Patrick Preston. Patrick Preston is the co-owner of HouseMasters, a local home inspection company. He has over 20 years experience as an accredited home inspector with HouseMasters Association of BC, or the Homeowners Home Inspectors Association of BC, and is licensed under the Consumer Protection Authority. He's also a Red Seal journeyman carpenter and a former builder contractor. When I've worked with Patrick in the past, you can tell how knowledgeable he is. So we're super excited to have him on the call today. Patrick is certified to conduct infrared inspections, evaluate solid fuel burning appliances. So for those of you who don't know what that is, I'm sure Patrick will explain that. He's completed eco-energy audits. He's sampled indoor air quality, all things I didn't actually know about that you were qualified to do. So that's very cool. And inspect commercial buildings as well. Patrick has personally conducted over 7,000 quality home inspections on Vancouver Island. Patrick, that's impressive.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, wow, 7,000. That's like a marathon. Our other speaker is Bryan, and he's a co-owner and operator of VI Pest Control. This is a family-run business serving Nanaimo, Parksville, and the Comox Valley, including Campbell River. He's a certified technician who is trained to conduct pest control in accordance to Integrated Pest Management Act of BC. All these titles are very precise. With a decade of experience, Bryan has dealt with ants, termites, bed bugs, ooh, joy, spiders, mice, and other pests that may trigger your pest-related fears. His top priority is to always quickly, effectively, and safely protect your home and business from any issues related to pests, especially structural damage issues. So we're very, very honored to have both you on the call today. And I hope everyone gets to learn a ton of new things. So Denise is going to kick it off with some questions for Patrick.
So Patrick, when you're doing a home inspection, what are the most common pests that you find here on
The
Vancouver?
most common.
Yeah.
Yeah. First, as a home inspector, and a training inspector in the province, I have to start with the disclaimer that a home inspection is not a pest evaluation. That's what Bryan and his compatriots are for. We're looking for visible evidence of damage. So one of the most common things we find in these areas are carpenter ants, rats, mice, powder post beetles, and the odd termite here and there, depending which part of the island you're on.
Where are the termites? I've never come across termites when I've been doing inspections.
Bryan would probably be able to answer that better. I found them
Oh, okay.
on Gabriola Island, up in the Qualicum area, in the Duncan area, just about everywhere we go, but they're not as widespread in my experience as carpenter ants are.
Huh. So, Brian, what about you? What have you found? The same thing as Patrick, or have you come across any other critters?
Oh, I mean, basically, you name it, we come across it. So, carpenter ants of all sorts, carpenter ants especially. Subterranean termites are more so depending on the topography. So, north of Nanaimo, like Dover Road area down to the water, the sandier portions of Parksville, Qualicum Beach. There's lots of subterranean termites through there. And then, of course, your insect, like rodents, rats, and mice are everywhere. um, Bed bugs, cockroaches, more so in multi-residential, um, and then the odd like silverfish, fleas, kind of things of those general nature.
Gives me the heebie-jeebies and starting to make me feel itchy. So, Patrick, as a home inspector, how do you find evidence of pests?
A lot of it is just based on experience and number of inspections we've done, but you start to learn the telltale signs. How many homes have done beautiful raised beds or garden beds around the house, and they end up burying the bottom bit of their siding in dirt or mulch? And I know typically when I get in the crawl space and look in that area, we're going to find some evidence of insects, right? So getting the keeping the dirt away from the siding. The other one is the obvious things when you walk around and you see the chewed holes in the screens in the soffits or the gable end vents, where you can just tell, oh, we're going to have some issues in here. And with trees and vegetation right on the building, to me, that's just a highway for all kinds of critters getting in. So we're just looking for those signs that make it easy for them more than anything.
Yeah, because from what I understand, they like the path of least resistance. So if they don't have to expose themselves to get to the yummy goodness of wood siding or something, they're super happy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Laura, do you want to?
Oh, do you want me to take the next one? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So beside the fear factor, what problems can pests cause? Bryan, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Subterranean termites will eat the wood as a food source, cellulose material, so the framing of your home or some of the styroboard, whatever have you, they get into. Obviously, rats and mice will chew wires, nest in insulation, chew through vehicles also. Um, you've also got disease and fecal matter urine from rodents wherever they are pathing through. And then, of course, there's mental health issues mostly with people sleeping with bed bugs, and the sanity that they lose with knowing that the bug is coming for their blood meal while they're sleeping, which usually freaks them out quite a bit. And then some of the taboo stuff of talking about it, with other people or sharing it with friends and family sometimes happens. If you go to, someone's house and you happen to bring a cockroach or bed bug with you, of course, that's never a fun topic to discuss.
I actually never thought about that. I've never had bed bugs, and I've never thought about actually transporting.
You don't want to, but a lot of people, if it's bad enough, will carry them into their vehicle and or on their personal items, and then wherever they're going can, spread them just as easily, unfortunately.
Okay. Patrick,
Well, I
anything?
know I've always been told you never put your suitcase on a hotel bed. Like you always use the stands or a table or something because you don't want the bed bugs to go from the bed into your suitcase. So I religiously never put my suitcase on a bed ever. Like
The
that's
scissor lift.
Pardon me?
You always want to use the scissor lift that they have in the
Yeah.
rooms.
Yeah, exactly. Or a dresser top or something, if you don't have the scissor lift. But
I
yeah.
personally don't want to stay at a hotel that I think I could get bed bugs from.
Oh, it's almost all of them.
Oh, really?
It's
Ooh.
pretty hard not to with all the international travel these days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. This is, I'm sure we can keep going on this topic. That's crazy. But Patrick, you want to add anything to this?
Well, the way I kind of approach it to my clients is it's more common that we're going to find evidence of insects and rodents than we're not going to. So to me, it's always a matter of control rather than eradication. We share the rainforest with them. They're not going away, so our approach generally, or recommendation is, well, you can have outside, and once you cross the walls, then we got to call Bryan and the heavy guns in.
That's you know what? That's actually a good way to explain it, just like other things that we would typically run across in a home inspection. And it's not about, packing your bags and running away. It's more about, okay, how do we coexist together, and how do we keep, prevent it from becoming a worse scenario, or prevent it from happening in the beginning.
Exactly. I mean, they can do significant structural damage, but more often than not, you should be noticing some signs that can be, proactive on that before it gets to a dangerous point.
It's really true. Being preventative is really key.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question's for Bryan. Back in the hot seat. What type of pests do you deal with? What are your biggest money makers, I guess? And why is spring such a busy time for your business?
So mostly it's insect rodent. I don't do wildlife or birds or any of the more live trapping, other things like that scenario. So around here, it's mostly subterranean termites, all of the ants. As we get into summer further, May to September, you've got stinging insects, wasps and hornets, cockroaches, bed bugs, fleas, spiders, silverfish, carpet beetles. That's pretty much the most common. Springtime, essentially at around 12 to 15 Celsius, when the weather starts becoming consistently warmer, basically insects start leaving their hibernation process, looking for, starting new colonies and also feeding the nests that are already established. So springtime, everything wakes up and basically starts going.
So if you had to break down into like the, top 3 things, what are you predominantly doing in spring? Are you getting more calls?
Spring is mostly ants. The odd spider stuff, and people are catching, wasp nests already starting. So that's the odd one now. Most people come across them as they become quite large later into July and August, though.
Okay. Very, very, very cool. So in focus with the prevention topic, how do pests enter your homes, and where do they hide, Bryan?
Depending on the type of pest, carpenter ants can basically enter anywhere, but generally there's a reason why they're going to a specific spot. If there's been some water damage or just a habitable area from the exterior, branches touching the home, power lines, etc. Rodents basically need about a thumb to a pinky to enter the home. A lot of times you'll see cantilevers being a big entry point. The crawl space doors have been chewed away at, or some framing. Roof rats will get onto the roof all sorts of ways, branches, wires, and they'll usually enter the home under a soffit, kind of in the gable of the home, and then enter into the attic that way. So there's, many ways into a home. As Patrick's probably seen them all. Also, it can be quite difficult to stop regular entry into the home.
So when you come on site, you do a walkthrough around the home, because I know when you came to my home to do pest prevention, we did a really close step-by-step walkthrough around, and we notified, we actually both found the area next to the chimney that the contractor had overlooked. And you're like, well, they could be getting in right there, step 1. But is there anything that homeowners should be doing, like on a seasonal basis right off the bat to, prevent having to call you out? Not that it's not great to have your services.
Yeah, absolutely. Every season would be a good time to walk around the exterior of the home slowly, looking for identifiable issues. Like, so now you'd walk around the house looking for wasp nests under the soffits or eaves mainly. Just in general, watching for maybe ants trailing to and from the home. Weather does play a particular pathway for that, as in Carpenter ants will forage heavier in the warmer weather between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. So obviously a lot of people aren't seeing, not outside walking around their house with a red light or a flashlight. But generally, if there's something going on, if you're walking around the house once a month and just paying attention to signs of droppings or pathways, it just increases the chance of you identifying it early enough to sometimes stop it yourself without having the need of a professional.
That's super helpful. So Patrick, tracing back to you, what are the things you see when you're doing a home inspection? Bryan just kind of noted a little bit on it with the branches touching the roof. You want to
Yeah,
elaborate?
as I mentioned before, your siding buried, the vegetation's lovely. We all want our trees and bushes and flowers around, but try and keep them off the siding. And I'm still surprised after 20 years of doing this, how often I show up for an inspection and I ask somebody, the access point to their attic and crawl space. And how many people say, oh, I've never looked up there. I've lived here 20 years and I've never looked in my attic or my crawl space. If you can't physically do it yourself, or it gives you the heebie-jeebies, there's people around, but you should be having a look in those important places a couple of times a year for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Really,
So,
really important.
Yeah. So Patrick, are there any strategies you can recommend to people? Are there different things to do in different seasons that you found, or, are there certain things? I guess Bryan touched on that. Like right now, you should be looking for wasp nests.
Why
Do
don't
you
we
have
just talk
anything more
about
to
crawl
add?
spaces, Denise?
Oh yes, this is
Well,
true.
what I typically recommend to people, because there's some instances where you're buying a home and they've done a nice siding job and they put beautiful exposed aggregate walkways and they just happen to cover the bottom 2 inches of the siding. Well, I'm not the guy to tell you to chip up away all that sidewalk and so you've got your ground clearance. My suggestion there would be contact Bryan and get on a proactive preventative treatment program. So sometimes there's steps we can take, as I said before, looking for all the holes in the soffits and your siding and gaps around crawl space vents and crawl space accesses, very common spots. But yeah, the more proactive and the more we pay attention, a lot of what we find is what we call deferred maintenance. People just put it off until the next person has to deal with it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Bryan? It's kind of a duplication, isn't it, of the last question we asked, I guess.
One of the other ones is just, well, I see it all the time with rotten wood ties around the property or stumps that they've just left, become a major, basically nesting point or food source for insects. The biggest one for me a lot of times is bird seed, or people having chickens, especially now with the new laws in town and bylaws of allowing chickens. They kind of just throw the food all over the yard and it's bringing rats around and other things. So there's just little things that people can do.
That's a big problem. I actually have a neighbor who likes to feed the birds and throws out old pieces of bread
Yeah.
and puts them into a tree, but then, the wind blows them, they fall down, and it's bringing all sorts of critters to the neighborhood because on a regular basis they're putting bread out.
Mhm.
What can you do? Yeah, aside from, yeah, anyway, that's a
Well,
whole different, yeah.
Well, Bryan's heard my call for like help because I live downtown Nanaimo, and every time development starts, I get a little bit like worried that the rodents are coming, because when I purchased my home, I was surrounded by multifamily. So on both sides, as I was renovating, I would literally see rodents run down the driveway. And so I think I found 12 rodents when we caught 12 rodents, some type of rat-like specimen on traps with peanut butter. And then we rat-proofed the foundation of the heritage home, which is all part of what the contractor was hired to do. But every time there's new construction in the area, so they're, removing the tally-ho, they just took down the Caledonia building, my phone lights up and I have to call Bryan and I'm like, oh my God, I can't have rats again. And so Bryan's like, your house is fully secure. Let's do a walk around. So when you talk about prevention, Patrick, you just noted on it, like having having someone, you know, on a pest treatment plan really gives you a lot of peace of mind, because the last thing you want to do is have rodents come in, because you're dealing with replacing insulation, you're dealing with all these things. And if you can just prevent it from day one, it's so much easier. And so I currently have no rodents. I'm very happy. Thank you, Bryan. So, okay, I think we are back to the next question, which is really interesting. So what should homeowners do once they find the signs of pests in their home, Bryan?
Oh,
Sorry, I'm cutting out here.
All good. Did you hear my question by chance?
I didn't hear.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. So what should homeowners do when they have the first sign of pests in their house?
Whether it be droppings or actual bodies, a lot of times taking a picture next to either a ruler or a coin and either sending it to a pest professional for some identification is a good first step. Most people will end up Googling everything they see and then get terrified by the answers they start finding. But trying to identify what it is you're seeing, and then kind of taking the proper steps. If you need a professional to help, then calling someone in, or finding some of the home remedies that actually might work.
Can we talk a little bit more about that? What are some of the safe home remedies that you can do, you know, once you kind of determined what you might have, like, because not everybody does need your service. Some things are manageable or preventable, you know, with the right guidance.
So for rodents, like being able to set traps and monitor them would be something that some homeowners can do if they can handle dealing with the bodies. If it's a preventative for insects, being able to buy home defense or Wilson's antidote from the hardware store and spray around the house or spray portions of the home as a once a week thing, that can definitely help. Definitely better than nothing. The domestic products don't last as long, but it will be better than doing nothing as a preventative.
Can we elaborate on, you mentioned there's some products they can buy that, yes, they don't last as long, but can we elaborate on those with homes that have pets, for example, or homes that have children? Are there any things that we must be very conscientious of, the do's and don'ts, those kinds of things? Because I know, there's definitely some preventative, like, precautions you must take when getting your home treated, for example.
Everything you need to find with that will always be on the label. If you follow the label, that's basically the law of using the product. So that's usually an easy one to tell people. If you thoroughly read through the label, that'll give you all the answers of where and how you can apply or use the product. Most people don't read it properly. Whether they are not using gloves, not using masks, maybe being time away from the product or whatnot. If you follow the label, essentially, that's like following the law of the use of the product.
And when you talk about product not lasting as long, is it possible that they would just be better off to hire you from step one, because by the time they buy the product 2 or 3 times to get rid of the issue, it's equal? Or what are we talking, like, from a homeowner to like hiring someone versus doing it themselves? I'm always curious because, many of us like to tackle things on our own.
Yeah, I get what you mean. It would generally take about 4 to 5 gallons of using a domestic insecticide for spraying weekly for about 4 to 5 weeks to match my one treatment with the commercial insecticide.
Okay.
So by that point, they're probably paying more money than if they would have hired a professional.
Yeah, because I didn't find the cost to have you outrageous. I thought I had actually really good value when I hired you. And you also offered a warranty program, which I thought was top notch. I was thrilled with that. When we talk about pets or kids, just the labels, is there anything like when you spray with a commercial product, can the person go immediately home to their home, or how does that work?
No. So anytime a commercial product's treated inside a home, um, anywhere from 6 to 24 hours is it. Oh, did it not go through?
Oh, we heard
So if a
6 to
commercial
24
product's
hours.
used inside, 6 to 24 hours, yes.
Okay, very good.
So Patrick, when you're seeing signs of pests and same sort of thing, I know that you're going to be advising people differently. You're going to be saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I guess my big question is, and I've been involved in a number of home inspections where ants have been an issue, like the little shavings, you know, the little piles of, yeah. How do you know it's that and not a termite?
Well, that's where I start with the deferral that I am not the pest expert. We defer to Bryan, but quite often what I see in my experience is the piles of shavings or frass and debris. If you look really close, you'll find segments of ant carcasses there, or whole ant carcasses, or wings and things like that there. If, in my experience, when I would suggest maybe termites over carpenter ants would be when I'm finding mud tubes going up the walls or in the insulation. And sometimes if you break open those mud tubes, you'll see the little white dudes crawling around in there. So
Yeah.
again, we're usually at that point, my job is to say, call in the professional.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And oh no, go ahead, Laura.
termites are white?
You could see I believe that's the larval stage, is it not, Bryan?
Those are the workers, actually.
Okay.
So they're kind of like a skin color translucent a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ugh, sounds
boy.
horrifying. Sounds horrifying. So,
Can I ask one quick question for Bryan?
oh, please.
Yeah, thanks. It's just kind of a follow-up to the home remedies and the urban lore and the urban legends we hear. In your experience, how effective is mint oil? Because we hear that an awful lot. And I know of a couple of friends that had some success with it. I don't know that they could treat their whole house, but it certainly worked spraying the underside of the hood in their car to keep the rats out of the engine.
It can, yeah, it can maybe act as a bit of a repellent. If it's a pungent enough smell, it
Right.
might deter them from a small area.
Yeah, and like you touched on before with other home remedies, there would be a lot of retreatment or reapplication of that for it to be effective, I'd imagine. You have a great mint smelling car though.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming into spring, and I know when we were prepping for this call, one of the topics that we were having a good laugh about was the sugar ants. And in Mexico, my place is like basically right built in the jungle, and you can't leave a plate on the counter for like 10 minutes unwashed because they crawl through the screens. And so I spray my counters with peppermint oil or thieves oil, and I put cloves in my entranceways, and it seems to keep them kind of deterred. But like you said, it's like preventative. It's like putting on bug spray. And I mean, they
Yeah.
fumigate every 2 or 3 weeks, but it's like, you better not have too much fun that night and forget to do your dishes, because in the morning you wake up and you've got amigos, as we say. So with spring coming, I know I'm kind of deterring a bit, but how many times do you get calls about sugar ants, and do they go away on their own? Right?
So that's a funny question that you say that. Basically, daily getting calls about sugar ants. They'll start a lot of times from the end of winter all through the spring. And then a lot of people say that they magically disappear. And that's more so that they're foraging outside, not that they're coming in anywhere, that they're gone. So they are just generally looking for food and water inside. They're heavily food motivated. And as the weather warms up, basically above that 12 to 15 Celsius, they start finding their trail lines back to their outside food source. So that magical they're gone without doing anything is it's kind of a funny.
What's the most common places you see sugar ants enter into a home?
Sorry, I missed that one.
where are the most common places you find if like how the sugar ants are accessing a home? Are they accessing them right through a window? Because I know they're small, right?
They can, so exterior wall coming inward. A big one is with sugar ants is subterranean, just like termites in a way, where they're coming through the cracks of the foundation between the footing and slab and then entering the home that way. But I mean, they can fit anywhere. So through door jambs, window cracks, under the siding. I mean, basically anywhere they can fit through.
Okay. Wow, it's impressive. I know once you
Crazy.
have them, it kind of,
Yeah.
it can kind of drive you nuts until you get rid of them temporarily, because especially if you're on top of the whole cleanliness and keeping your kitchen clean, you're like, how did these get in?
Mm-hmm.
So
Patrick, what is the most unusual rodent inspection story you can tell us, or insect or whatever? What's your most unusual? Like you were like, holy cow, that was crazy.
It usually those would tend to be the bigger things that we don't really want to find. Like it's become my habit, any crawl space or attic, and I recommend this to people, before you open the hatch, knock on it. So if anything's there, it runs away, because you don't want to see it. You want to see the remnants of it. I got in a crawl space down by Buttertub's Marsh one day and got about 3/4 of the way through the building, and it was around behind a couple of big pylons and things that you couldn't see. And I got in the corner there, and there's a big, I guess technically the river otters, everybody here calls them sea otters,
Oh,
but an otter underneath the house. And it didn't smell very good in that corner. And it didn't, I looked at it and its eyes shone back in my flashlight, and I backed out of there quicker than I've ever crawled backwards before.
I heard they're very vicious. Like you do not want to mess with the
Yeah,
otter.
you don't want to be on your belly coming up to an otter. I had a similar thing with raccoons under a pool deck once, but the otter one kind of sticks out in my brain. Yeah, that wasn't very comforting.
Yeah, no, there was a house on Gabriola that they were trying to sell and couldn't figure out where the smell was coming from. And it turned out that a family of otters had moved in. I'm not sure if it was in the crawl or under the deck, but and they were bringing their food up and it fish and whatever else, and it was rotting and it they just looked everywhere and couldn't find where the smell was coming from. It turned out it was these otters that had taken up residence in their home.
Yeah, everybody needs a place
What
to
about
live.
you?
We just want to, have them sectioned
Yeah.
accordingly.
Oh, yeah, everything. Well, we've got so much nature. What about you, Brian? What's the weirdest thing you've ever come across?
It's generally the people more so than the pests. Um, there's some of the ways that people live is pretty interesting, and a lot of that odd behavior can sometimes cause um, quite a pest problem.
what are some of the
Usually,
common
the
things you
hoarding
see? Just too much
situations more so
stuff in
than
a house?
anything.
Sorry, Brian, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh no, I my connection isn't great. I'm not sure what's happening.
I was going to say, what are the most common things you see? Like just, floor to ceiling stuff, like too much stuff in a house. Is that what's causing a lot of these pest issues, or are you
That
seeing?
can, it's usually when they start to have too much stuff. That's also it goes hand in hand with basically neglect of the home in general. So they'll start to have probably water issues, um, food and garbage laying around that shouldn't be, and then generally the exterior of the home becomes overwhelmed with landscaping and other junk that's laying around. So it starts to create an environment for insects and rodents and basically anything.
Mhm.
Makes a lot of sense. So back to you, Brian, I guess. Some homeowners might have some concerns about the chemicals and pesticides. How do you ensure the process is safe? And we talked about not being in the home, but is there anything else that homeowners need to know? Because I know there's a lot of people that are very hesitant to use products, but we know they're more effective, and I'm guessing with your licensed background, you kind of know kind of all the preventative must know things. So can you elaborate a little bit more on the process and
Yeah.
how we can keep the house safe?
So basically, being a governed industry, we have to follow the Integrated Pest Management Act, so the IPMA. it's kind of got steps that we're supposed to follow with identifying the pest, monitoring pest activity, determining the action thresholds, which would mean to treat or not to treat, and then giving the owner the options and what those are to treat, and then basically evaluation on how things are going. As it comes with products, any kind of rodenticide has to be in a confined space, meaning a bait station that's locked and weighted and labeled, obviously. I don't use any rodenticide in the home at all anymore for many reasons. And then when it comes to insecticides and chemicals being used in the home, their product usage is very low and very minimal in those situations. There's no fumigation and tenting of homes like a lot of people kind of have that idea, and that it's going to fumigate and go over all their stuff and their food. Where most times it's crack and crevice around plumbing and electrical or baseboard areas, basically areas that are not touched by people. In theory, there's very low chance of getting exposure to product.
Really
So Bryan,
interesting. because-
you mentioned that we don't tent the houses, but I know I lived in Florida for a while, and you see the houses. They'd be completely tented, and the people have moved out and they're fumigating. Why would it be different there than here?
That's a Canadian and American regulation. So
Oh,
our Canadian regulations don't allow that, and that's also because they have different pests that they're doing that for. So that they're doing that for most and termites, which we don't have up here. And so hence the different treatment plans, and also Canada is much more strict on our usage and an allowance on certain chemicals. Even I mean, our catalog of chemicals is much less than what the Americans can get their hands on, and you need a commercial applicator's license to use most of the good stuff in Canada.
interesting.
So when you are at the big, big box stores and you see the chemicals locked up in behind the cases, and they take your ID to buy them, is like when you look at the price tags of those, we briefly talked about that. It's really just honestly, it seems like in summary, it's a lack of knowledge when people think that they can do it themselves and then they inherit the whole bottle of product. I mean, it kind of seems to me that it would make more sense just to have you come out and treat the issue, get it done once. What type of, like if someone does have carpenter ants, what type of price range are we talking? If you're comfortable sharing that, like, if you do have rodents, what are the typical price ranges and how many visits does one have to make? I know you have a great warranty program, but let's talk about that maybe if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, so most houses for a one-time exterior treatment will range from 150 to 200. That's treating the base of the home and then any of the troubled areas or nesting areas for the ants. Um, Full programs with a 1-year warranty for carpenter ants will generally range from 450 to 600, and that a lot of that depends on whether there's crawl space work, attic work, the linear footage of the home, and then obviously the square footage of the home, and in theory how bad things have gotten also. Um, Sugar ants are either one-time treatment or a 6-month warranty. Subterranean termites will have a 3-year warranty when a proper full treatment is done, meaning I'm able to actually treat the subslab area properly through the damaged area.
I had no idea that it was that reasonable, to be honest. I mean, I've paid your bills, but I didn't realize that's pretty reasonable when you think about it. And then you don't have to, I know you always wear gloves every time I've seen you and often a mask. So like it's really something that we've got to be very careful with, I think. Is that one of the things that homeowners often overlook if they don't read the labels right?
Yeah, a lot of times you'll see misuse of products, and more so just about their own PPE, their safety, right? Um, they'll spray something with their bare hands and wear no mask, or I mean Patrick probably sees it also, but when people go in their crawl space or attic to clean fecal matter and urine from rodents with a shop vac and with no mask, no gloves, haven't sprayed it down at all, it can be kind of scary to think of some of the things that are done with improper use or knowledge and education about what they're doing.
I think it's probably mostly knowledge. Don't, it seems rather benign. They just don't understand the risks involved. And Patrick, you probably going into places, you're probably all masked up too, because you don't know what you're going to be coming in contact with.
Yeah, there are, again, if I'm seeing outside and there's obvious fist-size holes and chew marks, then I know I'm going to find rodents and things in the crawl space. Then yes, I will mask and glove up for that. I always got my gloves on. For us more, that's we don't want to come across a couple of the different dangerous spiders that are around. So we prefer not to get bitten while we're into crawl space, crawling around looking at framing or something. So, gloves and knee pads, things like that are simple things we can do to crawl around and not get bit.
Yeah, yeah. And so you're indoor. I was just listening to Laura when she was talking about your qualifications, and you have an indoor air quality testing. Does that come into play with rodents and things like that, or is that more mold
Tip,
and
typically it's people concerned with mold or other indoor pollutants. I don't recall ever being called because the house was overrun with rodents to get an air quality sample. Then it's usually just bringing pest control and then bringing a good cleaning company. Most of the
Mhm.
air quality samples, yeah, it's usually for mold concerns.
Oh, okay, yeah, and we talked about mold last month. So yeah, that's another scary subject. All these things that we don't want to hear about, right?
Yeah, the things that
Patrick,
nobody wants to hear in their home inspection that we tell the vast majority of people about.
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you're finding signs of rodents and you're seeing signs of rodents in, say, insulation, whether that's urine or feces, um, how are you working together with someone like Bryan? Like, how extreme, as with your carpentry background, how extreme are people often recommending? Are they recommending all that insulation be removed? Are they recommending spot removal? Like, what is the process? Because I know everyone has a different comfort level of, what the remediation should be. So
Yeah,
together,
and I think, typically it is a matter of degrees. Sorry for interrupting there. Like a couple of droppings here or evidence that, hey, a rodent made it peed in this one spot, to me is way different than when you open it up and you look and you see trails through all the insulation and a lot of droppings or a lot of, previously wet areas. Well, then, you're probably more cost effective and you're probably further ahead of the game to just remove and replace rather than trying to clean all this insulation.
can you talk a little bit more about what you do when you do an air quality test? What's involved in it, just briefly, and also
Yeah,
can you explain to our callers, because I thought it was very interesting, some of them might not know what a solid burning appliance inspection is. I thought that might
sure.
be
So,
great, two
yeah,
things to touch on.
indoor air quality, we basically bring a little air pump into the house and we do a test outside first because there's always different types of molds and mildews and pollens and things floating through the air everywhere. So we get our base sample outside the front door, and then based on square footage we come in with that air pump and we take a sample per 1,000 square feet kind of a thing. Then we send that off to the lab. They send back a wonderful report telling you all the different things because there's always something there. And there's usually different types of molds, and they're going to explain, the lab determines for you how significant of a risk those are. Most homes have molds and mildews in them. I mean, we all love our cheeses and things like that, right? But it's a couple of the bad ones we don't want around. And then again, it's making sure they don't have the reason to be there, the right temperature range, humidity range, and the food source. If we get rid of those things, well, you won't have molds and mildews around.
I have a question from the audience for Bryan. Um, Gail is asking, do you do the same conditions attract termites and carpenter ants? Or both pests active at the same time during the year?
So, good question, actually. Um,
Yeah.
Subterranean termites will generally be active year round, but they do slow down in the colder weather. Obviously, in the warmer weather, they are more active. They tend to be found around, obviously, on between cracks of the footing and the actual slab, generally around items that give off heat. So baseboard heaters, fridges, um, freezers, hot water tanks, furnaces. A lot of times they'll make their mud tubing through those areas coming into the framing of the home. Carpenter ants will hibernate through the winter and cluster into a big black ball, and then we'll start actively moving once weather warms up to about 12 to 15 Celsius.
And so as far as attracting them I know carpenter ants are attracted by moisture. Is that right?
Yes and no. They'll nest in a
Okay.
completely dry exterior void also, though. It's
Oh,
just, it's essentially a nesting point for them. You know, a home makes for a very nice, you know, whether it be a satellite nest off of a close by parent nest that's outside, or just, you know, it's a nice environment for them.
okay. And what attracts the termites in the first place? Is it just something that's in the area, or
It's usually
are
the
we?
topography that's subslab. So usually the sandier areas tend to have them moving through the soil easier. And then, of course, the heat drawing them up to the slab itself. Heated floors are a big draw, and I'm starting to see more and more of that, you know, becoming an issue.
Oh, that's interesting.
How do you
Um,
do a termite prevention program? Is it all through spraying or is it through
There
any?
aren't there's no prevention program for termites. The treatment is sub slab. So in theory, if you wanted to do prevention, um, you're either doing an exterior, um, basically trench and an application, or you're going through the slab itself into the soil below, which most people don't want to have that many holes through their slab to do a possible prevention for something they might not ever have an issue with.
Okay.
I have a question for Bryan. So and Patrick, subterranean termites. Do you only always see the tubing, or can sand be also an evidence? Like, for example, I was in a home inspection once, and I started to look for some of these things because of doing home inspections with Patrick and having Bryan out subsequently because we've found things. You learn, right? And I was in a home inspection once, and there was sand around the pipe that came up beside the hot water tank. It was just a bunch of sand. And the inspector didn't say anything. And we went through the walkthrough, and I said, so what's the sand? And it turned out that we were told when we got a pest guy out, the seller got them. So it wasn't, I don't think it was you, Bryan, but anyways, that it was subterranean termites. Does that sound, is sand a thing or not?
No. So
No.
sand cultivated up from subslab like that would be from either pavement ants or sugar ants.
Okay.
Subterranean termites will only use their mud tubing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just realized, Patrick, that I went to our guest question without getting an answer from you about the solid fuel and what exactly that is. Sorry about that.
No problem. That's a pretty quick and easy one. Solid fuel burning appliances means I can certify your wood stove or your pellet stove. So solid
Ah,
fuel is, yeah, wood burning appliances typically. And we do freestanding wood stoves and pellet stoves. We leave the inserts and things like that where you need a level 2 or level 3 wet inspection to the chimney sweeps, because that involve, you know, taking things apart and moving things, which as home inspectors we just don't do.
right. Yes.
Do you see more rodent or signs of rodents in certain types of homes heated, for example, with wood burning fires, like say, for example, bringing wood into a home to use a wood stove? Or is there any correlation between the type of heat of the home or if they're on slab or crawl space? Like, do you see more signs of rodents in certain?
I'm quite often I quite often recommend when we see firewood stored up against the house to relocate your firewood because that's conducive to insects and rodents. I mean, it's a little hidey home for them, right? You can see little eyes coming out of there. But, you know, anything that makes life easy for them, we want to remove at least away from the building. You know, as Bryan touched on, if you've taken down that big old dead tree, but you left the stump 3 feet away from your house, something's going to go live in that stump, and that's not very far away from your house. So then, you know, maybe that's more getting rid of that stump as well. So, you know, things like that. I haven't found a correlation with a heat type, but I'm very curious that Bryan has mentioned he's seeing more with in floor heat or in slab heat because we do see that. So that's something that I will be.
Oh, you're breaking up a bit, Patrick, but I think what you were saying is that the in-floor heating and oh, we've lost Patrick. Yeah, the in-floor heating, that really surprised me as well, Bryan, that would be an attractant for termites.
Yeah,
I guess they're looking for a warm place to live.
They are.
And then in-floor heating is often a cement slab. Very often, you don't want to start drilling into that cement slab through the in-floor heating to treat the subterranean termites. That just sounds like a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, you won't. You can't drill through that slab to get access to it. So if someone does have in-floor heating, either running through the slab or underneath any of the tile, I will personally not drill through that. I don't know if other companies will or not, but that's just got more damage waiting to happen if you try.
Yeah, makes
What
sense.
about the great hobby that people love to store things in their crawl spaces? Talk about that, both of you, before we wrap up. You know, what are the should do and should not do? Because I mean, I've heard Patrick's spiel, but please share it with us. But like, what should a crawl space be used for, Patrick?
It's not typically for storage, but we know everybody uses it. If you're going to put things there, lift it up off the floor because most crawl spaces are going to get damp at some point. And again, to me, it's more like hiding areas, right? It just limits what you as a homeowner can do to see if there's activity down there. So if it's packed with storage and you're not going down there, then you're not going to know if there's an issue.
My favorite is the cardboard boxes in crawl spaces. Bryan, want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm sure Patrick's gone into some too, but I've gone into some crawl spaces and there's so much stuff down there you can't see the outer walls or even move around. So not much I can do to help someone when there's not even a pathway to get through. I understand people have to put their stuff somewhere, but it can be a flood, fire, there's all sorts of hazards that can come along with that too, right? So
we had a question earlier from James. James, I'm not sure if your question got answered regarding the indoor-outdoor pesticides. Did I catch all of the questions that you asked, or did you have any others?
You can unmute yourself if you wanted to hit.
Yeah, James was talking about things that, you could do yourself, we believe, in the questions, which was great. So we tried to, talk a little bit
incorporate those, but I just wanted to make sure, James, that I got all your questions. Do you see how to unmute? It's a microphone at the bottom that you just take.
We love it when our guests on the call say,
there you are. Perfect.
Yes.
Did we get all your questions answered?
Oh, yes, I've had a lot of questions answered, and I really appreciate the gentlemen that are giving the information because it's something that I'm a little bit aware of because of the fact I've been in the industry for like carpentry and construction and things like that. That's my trade. So I'm aware of a lot of the things. But yeah, the thing I'm interested in knowing is the indoor-outdoor pesticides, they are different, aren't they? In regards to
no.
In regards to like human contact with
the commercial insecticides.
Okay, if let's say there's a homeowner that wants to do his own inspection and help to eliminate pests. The indoor pesticide, is that harmful to humans?
So most of the domestic insecticides that you can buy from the store, if you follow the label on them, I think there's still generally a time out of the structure when applied.
Okay.
I haven't used a domestic product for quite a long time, so I'm not exactly sure what the label says, but you would have to read the label to find out its indoor use requirements.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you, because the outside ones are a little bit different, and the the off-gassing of the outdoor pesticides, you're not really affected by that because it's in the atmosphere, right? In a way you are, but still it's a little safer to use it outside than indoors, right?
Sorry, I missed half his question.
He was wondering if using the outdoor ones is safer than using the indoor ones, just because the toxins are being dispersed. So, yeah.
Yeah, most products domestically can be used indoor, outdoor. It's just a matter of the different regulations that apply to them when they're used indoor or outdoor. So yeah, the label would definitely explain all of that, depending on
Okay.
which product.
I have one more question. You go into a hardware store and you'll see a whole bunch of labels on aerosol tins, and this is for ants, and this is for silverfish and cockroaches. Is it advisable to select those particular units or those products for each one that you want to use, or can you get a general pesticide that will help to eliminate a lot of the problems?
That's mostly marketing. Go and look at the cans themselves and look at the active ingredients and the additives, and it's all
Yeah.
pretty much the same.
I think that's
There's
great, Brian. I mean,
very little difference.
Just
Yeah,
So
different labels.
So
Yeah.
basically you can get a general one and it'll take care of a lot of the pests. You don't have to buy specifically for ants or various others because the chemical composition of it is pretty much all the same right across the board.
Pretty much for all the domestic stuff, that's correct. The commercial stuff, it does start to differ quite a bit depending on what pest you're trying to eliminate, but domestic products all tend to be very similar. There might be a different additive depending on the secrets of the product, but it's all very similar.
Well, as long as you have your hands covered and a mask and whatnot, and you don't get it on your skin, I guess you're pretty well safe, to use it. And that's pretty much I've
Yeah,
always
I
done
mean,
that.
it'll have the label will also have all the PPE requirements to use it.
Yeah.
those are always
Yeah.
loaded questions, James. So
Yeah.
take precaution. Don't forget your gloves. And when in doubt, hire a professional. It
That's
sounds
a good idea. Very good. Thanks very much,
Yeah.
guys. I really appreciate your time.
we
Is
do
there
really
any-
love you guys' questions, and
Yeah.
we so much appreciate you taking the time, because these calls are so great when we have input. So we do really appreciate audience input on these, and thank you so much, Brian and Patrick, for taking your time out of your valuable evening. I know your schedules are super busy. Patrick, you're probably going back to finish home inspections, and Brian, I'm sure your kids are asking where your dad, where you are and when you can go play with them. So we look forward so much to having you guys, share this resource, and thank you both so much. Denise,
Question for
anything to add?
Brian?
No, that's about it. This was amazing. Learned a lot. Thank you so much. And
I think
yeah,
we have,
we'll see you out in the field.
Got a
think
question
there's
for
a
Brian?
question.
we had one question, one
Oh.
guest who has a question for Brian.
Sure.
Oh, cool.
Brian, hey Brian, I was just wondering, are stink bugs something you should worry about?
So yeah, that's becoming a bigger. They're becoming more and more evasive lately. So the ministry is still at the point of saying no for doing treatments for them.
Yeah.
The worse they get, that might change, but some of the home remedies are still being pushed as the recommended way of dealing with them. If you Google the home remedies for stink bugs, you'll probably get a long list of things that at this point, well, they work, and I've seen clients do it effectively. But yeah, so far we are recommended not to be treating for them.
We had our roof replaced, and when they redid the flashing around the chimney, they didn't put it back down again. So the flashing was up. Well, I never noticed because I didn't go up on that side of the house and look, figuring the roofers knew what they were doing. And the wasp got in there and made a wasp nest. Came down the wall and behind the chimney, and so it finally got that eradicated. But so when they took the skylight off the roof, it's a sun tunnel. And I told them that you can't just pull it off. The hose is connected to it. It's got to be done. So they just ripped it off. And then they stuck it on with duct tape up to the skylight. So the stink bugs, I guess they got in when that was open. So they come around up because they're looking for the light, I guess. And they come up to the tunnel, and then they end up on the lens down on the ceiling. So I didn't know how to get rid of them, or are they something I have to worry about, or like I clean it out every couple of months, and you still get 3 or 4 sitting on top of the lens on the ceiling. And I don't know how to go in there and just let a bomb go, or because then I'm just going to get in the insulation, and because I guess it has some residual effect, and I don't know if that'll kill them, or
try some of the home remedies. They're pretty simple, but yeah, pretty effective.
Okay. So just like a spray up in there?
I think you have to Google it, Bill.
Yeah, okay, I'll try it.
You're not really sure of what the home remedies are, Brian? Yeah, or there's many of them?
There's so many different types. There's about six to eight that people have said that work that I've seen.
Yeah, you don't have any firsthand experience of which one.
Yeah. At this point, not yet, no.
Patrick, are you finding stink bums? What are they called?
Stink bugs. Amaurated stink bugs.
In home inspections?
No, not generally. I mean, I see a few of them around here and there, but I haven't to a point where I would consider it an issue yet. But again, every house is different. One house can have tons of different kinds of bugs. So
it's in the
I
lower
guess
mainland.
they like your home, Bill.
Yeah, the lower mainland in the Fraser Valley.
Yeah.
Okay.
My dad had a lot of them. He was in the Nelson area, but he had a lot of cedar trees next to him, and he attributed them to the cedar trees. And I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have fruit trees.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Our speakers are eager to get on with their evening. Thank you both. Thank you both so much for your time and all of your knowledge. These calls aren't possible. These video sessions aren't possible without, you volunteering your time. So thank you so much from both Denise, myself, and Connie. And we look forward to the next session that'll be happening in the first week of June. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Brian. Thank you,
everyone.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.